there, this is Clint and Allison Dowda from A Double Dose of Dowda, and we are excited to talk with you today about this idea of bless, address, and press that we covered in a previous video. If you want to go back and catch that previous video, check out the description for this video below, and you'll have a link to go watch that. Today, we're going to specifically dive into what does bless look like as a type of feedback that you can give for teachers. Now, keep in mind, some of these things you can use as a classroom teacher to give feedback to students, but what we're talking specifically about today is in the coaching role, what does that look like for instructional coaching for bless?
So if anybody hasn't seen that previous video, just in 1 minute or less, what does that mean, bless? Where's that coming from?
Sure. So bless comes from this idea that with feedback, you give feedback geared toward either asking teachers if they want you to bless, address, or press. And with bless, that just means a teacher wants you to give feedback and they just want you to tell them how great they are. They just need a win. They just need a little pat on the back. And that's fine and that's great, and there is nothing wrong with needing a win or a pat on the back. As a teacher, there's so much that teachers do that goes unnoticed. And so through a coaching eye, through that lens, you see and can recognize all of those little things. And so being able to give them some feedback specifically just on what's going well is going to be really meaningful and helpful for those teachers. So that's what I mean by when we talk about bless. And I'll point out also that even if a teacher has asked you to address or press, which address means there's something in particular that they want you to provide feedback on, or press, which is, it's wide open, you can give feedback and just really push them in an area and give them feedback there. In those cases, it's always good to give a bless somewhere. Everybody needs some positivity to hear that they're doing well in some way. So today we're going to talk about specifically bless and what that looks like in coaching.
Okay, so let's say that you are doing a visit to a classroom and the teacher has asked for you to bless them. To bless them. What do you do as an instructional coach if you go into that classroom and it's just a mess, like a hot mess, and it's like you have a list a mile long of things that need to be fixed in your mind? What do you do? How do you go about that?
Yeah. So sometimes that can be difficult because there are lessons that even for the best teachers, it doesn't make you, and as classroom teachers, it doesn't make you a bad teacher to have a bad lesson. And so sometimes just reminding teachers of that can be helpful. But for me, when I go in and I tell teachers, if a lesson doesn't go well and the building catches on fire and everything's going horribly wrong, first and foremost, I will never go speak to an administrator about that. It will always stay between me and the teacher. I think that's just one thing with building relationships with these teachers, that you have to have that they have to know that you're a safe person and you're not out to get them. So even when there seems to be nothing wrong or nothing going well in a lesson, there's always something. And so perhaps it has nothing to do with the lesson that they taught or the students that were in that classroom. Maybe it's just, I really loved the anchor charts that you had posted around the classroom, or the organization that you had for, in routines for sharpening pencils was fantastic and well thought out. Sometimes it's a stretch. Sometimes you just have to find something and just really build that up and praise that with that teacher. One thing that I'll add to this too is even if it's a rough lesson, hopefully there's some moment that you can capture. Maybe you can find a moment where a teacher went to help a student. And in those cases, I think it's really important to point out that you saw what happened. Like I might say, teacher, you went to this student and they asked this question, and I noticed that you got down on their level. You spoke just with them one-on-one, and they seemed to respond really well to what you were saying, and they were able to solve the next problem on their own, if that's the situation that you can apply to it. In that case, you acknowledge specifically what the teacher has done, and you acknowledge how the student responded. And so just the more specific you can give feedback, the better. And sometimes, if it's a really rough lesson, sometimes it's much easier to find that one little thing that went really well other than a big pattern of something.
Okay, well, let's flip that and say you're going to a classroom and they want to be blessed, and I mean everything just runs perfectly smooth. Like, how do you pick what you're going to identify with them?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so sometimes that happens where you do have your high-flying teachers who just want to be blessed. Now, for the most part, I have found that those teachers, they want to be pressed or they want to be addressed with something, but sometimes they just want the win. And again, all teachers deserve a pat on the back for something. What I recommend is if it is a relationship that you have had with a teacher, a coaching relationship that you have had with them, and you know that there are areas that they have really worked to improve and to get better, then in those cases, it is a good idea to pick something from that area that you know they have been working on, and that can be an area that you praise them in. And you can refer back to previous times you have worked with them, to the growth that they have made in those areas. Sometimes it's just good to bless something that they are naturally gifted in and naturally talented at as a teacher.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've gone through and you've done this observation and you're blessing them.
Mm-hmm.
How do you use that to go forward in the coaching process? Like, how do you get to go back and keep working with them?
Right. Because the reality is that if your coaching relationship with the teacher is all about telling them how great they are, and I think this is what you were kind of referring to, how do you get them to grow as a teacher?
Yeah.
And so in that case, I think that ideally you aren't blessing teachers, after you've worked with them a long time. But if it's one of your first times working with teachers, then you use that as an opportunity to make them feel good and make them feel that you are a safe place and that they will want to continue working with you. Then what I like to do is in later observations, let's say that they want to get feedback from you that is an address or a press, and there's some matter that they need to give some special attention to. When you have already blessed them for that one particular area, then you can incorporate that into what they need to address or be pressed on later. So as an example for this, let's say that you have a teacher who you blessed them in their first feedback conversation to compliment them on how well organized they are and how well they plan and think out a lesson. So in later conversations, perhaps you're having a conversation later where you have noticed that the teacher does not have closure to their lesson, or the teacher is not asking strong questions throughout their lesson. So a conversation you can have with them later is you pull back on that previous conversation.
You remind them how much you liked their planning and organization.
How much you liked their planning and organization, and you say, this is kind of a coaching thing, because you wouldn't come out and say, you don't seem to be planning for that, for questioning, or that sort of thing. Instead, what you would say is, I wonder, because before you did such a great job with planning and being organized with these lessons and very thoughtful, what has been your approach to planning these things like closure or exit tickets or questioning? And I'll tell you, oftentimes when I talk with teachers, what they come back and say immediately when I ask that is, oh, well, I haven't planned for that. I haven't given that any thought. And so what you're hoping is, as a coach, you are asking questions that lead teachers to their own conclusions. So that one is kind of a guiding question, and that you're asking them to tell you about the planning and organization that they've put into it. But if they haven't put any, then that's a great spot for them. And then you can rely back on, well, how do you usually plan for something? What strategies can you use that you already do in order to, bring some strength to this area that you're wanting to beef up?
Yeah.
So,
very good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing that with us.
Hey, you're welcome.
Be sure to check out all of our other videos. We'll have links to them. We'll have also an address and press, and we can give you lots of information. So just check that out below in the description.
As always, thanks for watching, and we would love for you to subscribe to our channel. Thanks so much.